He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn. You owe him your allegiance.
Aragorn is one of the most admired fantasy characters to ever be written and put to film. And I mean, I can see why. Just look at that face. Sorry, got a little distracted. Aragorn is strong, just, loyal, empathetic, compassionate, the perfect example of positive masculinity. Just ask Cinema Therapy. So why wouldn't you want to play him in BG3? Apparently other YouTubers have thought the same, but I couldn't find any full builds, just basics and appearance. It's time to fix that. Starting off with the basics, we obviously know that Aragorn is a human. He's a special type of human because he comes from the line of Númenóreans, but that doesn't exist here, so human it is. Now this is where people are probably going to get a little perturbed, but there is a reason that I am doing this. We're starting off as fighter. We are going to be doing ranger too, we're going to be switching to it. The reason that I need to start this build as fighter rather than ranger like I wanted to originally is because if I start as ranger and swap to fighter later, he will not get heavy armor proficiency. I would have to use another method of giving him that proficiency, which is really wasteful when you can just start as fighter and then go to ranger. So that is why we're doing this here, even though it's a little less lore friendly than I would have liked. Okay, that out of the way. Fighting style, we are going to start with great weapon fighting. Now, I know some people are probably going to think, what? Great weapon fighting? But he fights with long swords, and this says that you need a two-handed weapon. I checked it out. Great weapon fighting works with versatile weapons, which means long swords as well. So put your mind at ease. Now, if you wanted to, you could do defense here too. I mean, getting a +1 to armor class while wearing armor, which she's going to be wearing the whole time, makes sense as well. I find great weapon fighting to be a little bit more appropriate here because he really doesn't miss much when he's taking a swing at something, but defense would be totally fine here as well. For background, I am going to go with Outlander. Again, this may have some contention. Some of you may be thinking, well, why not noble? He is, after all, the heir to a throne. Yes, he is. But when you think about the life that he lives, he's really living more as an Outlander. He's known as Strider, he's known as a Ranger, so I really think Outlander is more appropriate. Also, it gives you skills in athletics and survival, which you're going to want for his build, so kind of a win-win there. Now for the ability scores, let's just clear that out there. We're going to want to focus on strength, dex, and constitution. However, I don't think any of his scores should be less than 10. He's just all around good at everything he does, so we're going to put charisma at 10, wisdom at 12, intelligence at 10, con is going to be 14, dexterity 14, and strength 16. So that's a pretty good spread. Now for skill proficiencies, as we just saw, he gets athletics and survival from the background. He's going to get 1 from race and 2 from class. So we're going to pop out the persuasion one and we're going to put that under nature. Since he has been a ranger for so long, he's very familiar with plants and animals in the wild. We're going to keep acrobatics granted from class, but the second point, instead of intimidation, we're going to put that under perception. I think this is more appropriate for the build. Again, being a ranger, he's had to be very perceptive about the environment around him just to survive. All right, and let's move on to appearance now. Okay, we're gonna start off with body type 2 and head 4. It's not an exact match, but I find that this is the closest. For skin, we're going to go with warm tone 3. Give him a little bit of color. Sometimes he looks a little bit on the tan side. And then scrolling down, we're gonna give just a little bit of maturity. We're gonna go up to just about 30-ish% here, just so we see a little bit of wrinkles going on. Remember, by the time we get to the Fellowship of the Ring, he's already been around for quite some time. Now, because he has Númenórean blood, he's going to live a lot longer than the average human. Moving on to eyes. I'm going to be basing the appearance on the Aragorn that we see in the movies. So Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn. That just makes it easier. So the eyes are going to be like this kind of gray bluey color. And I think we need to click on all eye colors to actually get it. There you go. White 3. Now, obviously, this is not white, so I'm not really sure why they called it that, but it's got a little bit of a gray blue look to it, which is what we see in the movie, so that is what we're going with. Then down to hair, and scroll down to willow tears. And yes, I know, this hairstyle gets used so many times for so many characters. I used it for Sirius, I used it for Dritz. It's just a haircut that tends to work for a lot of like fantasy characters, so there you have it. All right, for the color, we are going to choose the darkest brown here, which is brown 5, but it's still a little bit on the light side, so we're going to darken it up a little bit more by going into highlights. Gotta check all highlight colors and grab black, and we're going to turn that intensity up right about 60%. You can see that just darkens it up a little bit. Doesn't look black, just looks like a darker variation of brown. And then for facial hair, caveat here, normally jaw clinger would be the right choice because he often just has stubble, just a little messy, a little rugged. But as you can see, this looks terrible, just absolutely atrocious. And honestly, it's looked like this for a very long time. Really hope that Larian eventually gets around to doing something about these thinner facial hair choices because they just look horrible. So instead of that, we're going to go with Groomed Rascal. This is a little bit fuller of a beard than I would say he has in Return of the King, but it's close enough, and the other one just does not look good enough, I think. So we'll go with this one instead. All right, and that will do it for appearance, so let's move on to the build. Now, fortunately for this build, I didn't have to use a hireling. Brandon was able to come in here and make a character, bring it into my game so that we don't get confused between the actual background of the character and the background of the hireling. So that'll be nice. So here we go. We've got our Aragorn here, and we are now going to swap to Ranger. Remember what I said earlier? We're just starting as fighter so that we can get that heavy armor proficiency. That's really the only reason, so we're going right back to Ranger. Now, when you start with Ranger, you got to choose a couple things. First is going to be favorite enemy. You could make arguments for a couple here, but I think the most applicable one is Keeper of the Veil. If you see how this is described here, you specialize in hunting creatures from other planes of existence, gain proficiency in Arcana, protection from good and evil. Considering the types of things that he has to keep hunting down, I'd say this is pretty appropriate. Now, some of them do not count as creatures from other planes of existence, but they definitely are otherworldly, especially the Nazgul, so I think this one is appropriate. For Natural Explorer, I really hemmed and hawed over this one for quite a while, because I feel like there's an argument for a few of them, but out of the ones available here, I ended up going with Wasteland Wanderer Poison. Out of all of the various environments and conditions that he has to deal with, considering the way that the orcs and the Uruk-hai fight, they tend to have a liking for poison. So I'm assuming that over the years of wandering in the wild and dealing with just the hazards of the wild, meaning poisonous animals, poisonous plants, and then of course the poisonous weaponry that is used by the enemies like the orcs and Uruk-hai, I'm assuming that he's gained a little bit of natural resistance over time, so that's the one we're going with. And then go into skill proficiencies and change stealth to animal handling. Animal handling because, as we can see a couple times within the movies, he does have a bit of an affinity with horses. He likes to speak Elven to them. Moving on to level 3, we're still sticking with Ranger at this time. We're going to pick our 2 spells. We're going to go for functionality here. He's not a spellcaster, of course, so we're going to go with Enhanced Leap and Long Strider. Long Strider, well, I mean, do I really have to explain that to you? Enhanced Leap because, man, this guy can jump. If you remember that scene at Helm's Deep where first he has to toss Gimli over to the bridge there, and then he does the leap after it, I mean, damn, that is quite the jump. All right, and then for fighting style, we already have great weapon fighting from fighter. Now we're going to do archery for ranger. Now, granted, Aragorn is typically seen fighting with a longsword. That is his preferred weapon, but he's no slouch on a bow either. Level 4, continuing with Ranger, it is now time to choose the subclass and another spell. So for the spell, little bit of dealer's choice here because you've got a couple viable options. You could go with Goodberry because he does know about some plants that are good for healing. Again, he's a ranger, been out in the wild for a long time. He has gained information and insight about these things. Hunter's Mark is always a good option for any kind of ranger, and Aragorn definitely deals a lot of damage whenever he gets a swing in, so that's appropriate. Speak with animals, like I was saying before, the guy also likes to talk to horses, so I'm going to go with Speak with Animals on this one, but I would say any one of those is really a viable choice. For subclass, he may like horses, but I wouldn't say that he really is appropriate as a Beastmaster. We're going to go with Hunter, which unlocks Hunter's Prey. Again, there may be a little bit of argument for any of the ones here, but I think Hordebreaker is the most appropriate. I had a little bit of a debate on this one, but after thinking about it more, when it comes to the bigger creatures that they come across in the Lord of the Rings series, often Legolas is the one taking the killing blow. He's the one putting down the elephant and the cave troll. He's very nimble and quick, and he can get to those high places when he needs to. Aragorn is really better at breaking up these massive groups of enemies. I mean, again, you look at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and you look at the battle where he and Boromir are trying to fight off the Uruk-hai and Horks away from the hobbits, and he's just boom, 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 going from one enemy to the next. All right, level 5. This is going to be our last level in Ranger, and we are going to take our first feat. There are many feats that are actually really applicable to an Aragorn build, but I think the best one to start with is Alert. Having that +5 bonus to initiative makes a big difference, and as we've seen in pretty much all of the Lord of the Rings films, Aragorn is usually the first one to go running into a fight and take a swing. So I think that's appropriate. All right, now it is time to go back into Fighter. We're done with Ranger. So Fighter level 2, nothing to do here, we're just unlocking our action surge. Fighter level 3, it's time to choose the subclass, and the one that's been automatically chosen here, Battlemaster, I think is definitely the most appropriate here. By the time you get to the Battle of Helm's Deep, Aragorn is already starting to take up the mantle of being a true leader, leading others into battle, being more tactical in his attacks. So I think Battlemaster is very appropriate here. You start with 3 maneuvers. The ones that I think are best to start with are Commander's Strike. Again, he's starting to take that leader position now. He's starting to tell other people what to do in battle. Evasive Footwork. He moves pretty quickly, not as quickly as Legolas, but he does move quickly, and he's pretty good at evading attacks. And Sweeping Attack, again, this kind of goes into what I was saying about Hordebreaker. He's able to take on a lot of enemies at once. All right, now we are up to level 4 in Fighter, so it's time to get another feat. This time, we're going to do ability score improvement, and we're going to bump that strength up to 18. Since the majority of his levels are in Fighter, and that is more where the focus is of the build, having an 18 strength will definitely be helpful. For level 5 in Fighter, there's nothing for us to do here. We're just unlocking that extra attack. And I realize that it does take a while in this build setup to unlock that extra attack. So little disclaimer here, if you want to build this in a way that is more functional, you could just do all of your fighting levels first and then do your ranger levels, but that's up to you. Level 6, Fighter gets an extra feat. So it's time to choose our third feat now. And our third feat is going to be Sentinel. I think Sentinel is a really appropriate feat for the character of Aragorn. When he sees his allies getting attacked, he's going to run in there and try to help them. When an enemy within melee range attacks an ally, you use a reaction to make an attack against them, but you also get advantage on opportunity attacks, and if you get them with that opportunity attack, they can't move for the rest of their turn, so pretty handy overall. And now at level 7 Ranger, and level 11 overall, it is time to choose 2 more maneuvers. This time we're going to take Fainting Attack, which is basically just putting some additional damage into your attacks by using your bonus action, and Rally. Rally, I think, because again, the way that he fights, the way that he commands, it's all about supporting those around him. He's not just someone that goes off and fights on his own. He stays with his party. He protects them, he works with them, he gives speeches to bolster their resolve. See it right in the language there, bolstering their resolve. So I think rally is appropriate here. And now fighter level 8, which is the final level. We get 1 more feat. Isn't that awesome? 4 feats in total. And again, I'm sure there are different thoughts on the feats that would be appropriate for this build because there are many that would work. I'm going to go with Savage Attacker here. By the time you get to level 12, you're getting towards the end of the game. And I'm kind of thinking of that in my head the same way as we're getting towards, the final fight in Return of the King. And by that point, he's a pretty damn seasoned fighter, and he just does not have any fear anymore, if he ever did. He just goes in there and just massacres. By the time you get to the final fight in Return of the King, he is just ready to take these guys on and end it. So I think Savage Attacker is appropriate. Now that's the build done, so let's go over a few bonus items. If Daemon survives both Act 1 and 2, he will be available in Act 3 at the Forge of Nine, and he sells some pretty sweet armor. I'd recommend picking up the Armor of Persistence, a very rare heavy armor that will make your Aragorn extra tanky. As for weapons, we know that Aragorn's weapon of choice is the longsword, which he sometimes uses in one hand while holding a torch or a dagger, and sometimes uses in 2 hands. There are 2 longswords in BG3 that I think would work, one being a little more flavorful and one being more functional. If you want a fun homage to Aragorn commanding the legions of the dead, get your hands on the Blade of Oppressed Souls, which grants you the ability Crowning Strike. Unleash the wails of the dead that fell to your blade and possibly instill Crown of Madness. If you want a blade that just kicks serious butt, and is still a flavor win because it must be forged, craft yourself the Adamantine Longsword at the Forge in Act 1. This sword gives you Diamond's Bane, meaning that if you hit, it is automatically a crit, and Lethal Weapon, meaning that this sword ignores resistance to slashing damage. That is it for the build. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, and a subscribe would be really appreciated if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.